Now that was the beginning of his life. Now here's the end of his life. At the Last Supper in the upper room, he has said much, and these are his final words as the evening passes and they're about to go out to Gethsemane. He says to the disciples, "As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you and that your joy may be full." We're talking about the Spirit now. "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, and that greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. And you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you." And here it is. "But when the Helper comes, whom I shall send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will testify of me, and you will also bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. But now I go away to him who sent me." That's to the Father. He's talking about his death, and it's in veiled terms. "And none of you asks me, 'Where are you going?' But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away." This is the big part. "For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I depart, I will send him to you." Now it's worth to understand the parakletos, Greek. From para, beside, or around, near. And kaleo, to call. This is where we got a modern day word call. Kaleo. See the similarity? Called alongside. Hence, called to one side. And the word signifies an intercessor, a comforter, a helper, an advocate, a counselor. In non-biblical literature, parakletos had the technical meaning of an attorney who appears in court in another's behalf. Someone who is quite skilled in legalese and law and the thwarting of illogical injustice. The Holy Spirit leads believers to a greater apprehension of the gospel's truths. That is, whenever you're starting to get it, that's the Holy Spirit at work saying, "Ah!" In addition to generally help and guide us. He gives the strength to endure the hostility of the world system, also allows us to endure much suffering. And to go on with more of what Jesus said about the Spirit, "And when he has come, he will convict the world of sin and of righteousness and of judgment. Of sin, because they do not believe in me. Of righteousness, because I go to my Father and you see me no more. Of judgment, because the ruler of this world has been judged." And then finally, we got to the prayer part. Okay, so I wanted to make that clear, that when Jesus had accomplished what he accomplished on the cross and went to the Father, that's when the Holy Spirit entered into this world. And we find briefly in Acts, right? If we go to Acts, we find in chapter 2. That when the day of Pentecost had fully come, hang on just a second. They were all with one accord in one place. This is homothumadon. This is in like a symphony is all in tune. Everybody's tuned exactly to the same wavelength, and everything is happening in harmony. Homothumadon, I love that, being in unison. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them tongues of fire, and one sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now, this burning of fire, this represents the burning away of, and the net result of purity. We find Jesus in the Beatitudes saying that blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And this whole thing of being led by the Spirit, pursuing the Spirit, having the Spirit, cultivating a life with the Spirit, this is what Romans chapter 8 is all about. Now let's get back to Romans chapter 8 and move on to where I wanted to make mention that Paul mentions from chapter 8, verse 1 through verse 11, he mentions the word Spirit 11 times in 11 verses. Set their minds on the things of the Spirit. The things of the Spirit. To be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God and cannot be subject to God, so those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. Now, if indeed the Spirit of God, but if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies. And so on and so forth. So it's all about the Spirit, isn't it? And remember, this is not an undisciplined ranting and raving, or it's not emotional. You don't feel things that are spiritual. Emotionally, you might feel emotion. But everything that has to do with the Spirit is everything that has to do with God. And we do not have, the five senses don't compute the Spirit. It makes it difficult. And that's all for this particular segment. Now we'll wrap it up soon. Christmas Eve, not so bad, huh?